Directed by Robert Weiss and released in 1979, Star Trek the Motion Picture was a very polarizing film at the time of its release. Despite being a box office hit and the much anticipated revival of Star Trek after the original series' cancellation, the motion picture was divisive amongst both audiences and critics. Even in the decades since its release, the film continues to be a divisive one within the Star Trek community. Of the original run of Star Trek films, the motion picture tends to be the odd one out, being neither as beloved as Star Trek II nor as mocked as Star Trek V. But in the course of my journey as a YouTube critic, I found that these kinds of black sheep films are really interesting to me. I think I'm one of 5 people on the planet who ever gets an urge to rewatch Star Trek the Motion Picture. That's exactly what I got on a cold, rainy evening in which I had nothing to do. So, I threw it on, and to my shock, I actually really enjoyed it, and in a way that I hadn't when I was younger. After revisiting the film and really soaking it in, I have to say that much like with Alien 3, I think that Star Trek the Motion Picture has a lot of merit that people often overlook. So what was it that changed my mind about this movie? Well, here are my thoughts. Easily the most impressive aspect of Star Trek the Motion Picture is its effects and cinematography. Much like with the original Star Wars, all of the mini-models hold up incredibly well on rewatch, and the design choices are instantly iconic and recognizably Star Trek. What impressed me more than the mini-models are the shots of space, which are full of bright colors and dazzling, almost psychedelic effects. The common complaint about this movie is that the camera dwells too long on specific shots, but I disagree. The long shots each serve a purpose in their respective scenes. The long beauty shots of the Enterprise enhance the sense of adventure, the long mesmerizing shots of space enhance the sense of mystery, and the long ominous shots of V'ger enhance the sense of fear. To me, this is the most beautiful of the Star Trek films, and this is due in large part to these beautifully composed shots. They give the movie an operatic quality that is so mesmerizing to watch. It reminds me a lot of the original Fantasia, in the sense that so much of the film is focused on utilizing wordless storytelling, relying on the visuals and the music to convey the emotions of the scene rather than dialogue. And speaking of the music, the score by Jerry Goldsmith is phenomenal, and I would consider it the best score out of all the Star Trek movies. Each piece of music matches so perfectly with its respective scene. Ilea's theme is appropriately beautiful and sweet. The introduction of the Enterprise is heroic and triumphant. And the opening theme is probably the best thing to come out of this film. It is evocative of the John Williams Star Wars theme without feeling like a ripoff. The theme has been described as conjuring the idea of galleons sailing at sea, which perfectly fits the tone of adventure and discovery that the movie is going for. And this theme is so good, in fact, that it was repurposed as the main theme for Star Trek The Next Generation. It is probably the single most iconic piece of music associated with the Star Trek franchise. All in all, the effects, cinematography, and music are key in establishing the film's tone of mystery and discovery, which leads into the most divisive element of the film. Easily the most criticized element of the movie is its pacing. So much so, in fact, that this movie has often been referred to as Star Trek the Slow Motion Picture. However, I think audiences at the time wrongly interpreted the pacing as being a mistake rather than an intentional choice. If you look at Robert Weiss's other science fiction films, like The Andromeda Strain and The Day the Earth Stood Still, they tend to have the same kind of slow, deliberate pacing. But I think a major reason why this movie was so polarizing is because of what the landscape of science fiction looked like at the time. The record breaking success of both Star Wars and Superman had set an expectation for general audiences that science fiction cinema would be more action driven rather than concept driven. So when they saw this poster, they were probably expecting an action film more along the lines of Star Wars, but instead they got a much more contemplative and cerebral film along the lines of 2001. Star Trek the Motion Picture also released the same year as Alien, and it's interesting to compare the two, as I would argue they are really two sides of the same coin when it comes to how they use pacing. Alien has a slow, deliberate pace to build up the sense of tension and fear of the unknown, whereas Star Trek the Motion Picture has a slow pace to build up the sense of wonder and excitement of the unknown. A movie having a slow pace is not inherently a bad quality so long as it is intentional in building the drama and suspense. And I would argue that that is exactly what the motion picture does. The mystery and threat of V'ger would not be nearly as interesting if it were revealed early on, or if there was constant action to break up the pacing. In this way, the motion picture is a bit of an oddity for its time, as its pacing and tone are far more reminiscent of the classic sci-fi films that came before it than where science fiction was headed by the time it was released. As such, it is a film that probably was never going to be well received as a blockbuster, but as a cerebral piece of filmmaking is where it truly succeeds, and this is seen especially in the film's story. In many ways, Star Trek the Motion Picture is the purest Star Trek film in the sense that it is the film that sticks the closest to the spirit of the original series. It's a movie that is driven more by the concept and the exploration of its themes than it is by the characters or the action. The story follows Captain Kirk as he is reinstated aboard the Enterprise to intercept V'ger, a mysterious entity in space heading towards Earth with a seemingly hostile intent. While the story of the motion picture may be dry to some, it actually has more layers than people often recognize. At its core, it is a story about self-discovery, which is reflected in both the central characters as well as the antagonist. Kirk's story is about coming to the realization that the glory days are over, and that he may not be as capable as he once was. At the beginning of the film, he forcibly takes command of the Enterprise in a pretty underhanded and dirty way. He also constantly undercuts Decker at every point, despite Decker being the most familiar with the new upgrades on the Enterprise. And it is Kirk's removal of Decker from his post that results in the transporter accident that kills two of the Enterprise's crew members. But after Decker averts the crew from disaster while using the warp drive, Kirk softens towards Decker and is more understanding towards the crew at large. In the end, Kirk is able to resume command of the Enterprise, but only after he has let go of his own ego. Spock's story is about wrestling with the clash between his Vulcan heritage and his human heritage. At the beginning of the film, Spock is about to undergo the Vulcan Kolinar ritual, which will purge him of all his remaining human emotions, but he refuses when he senses the presence of V'ger. When Spock first comes onto the Enterprise, the old crew are unsettled by him, as he is far more cold and emotionless than normal. But after Spock mind melds with V'ger, we get this pivotal scene.
Spock, what should you have known? What should you have known?
This simple feeling is beyond V'ger's comprehension. No meaning, no hope. Jim, no answers.
And it is Spock's decision to refuse the Kolinar ritual that allows him to communicate with V'ger, since he retains his human emotions and is therefore able to understand V'ger's desire to evolve. In the end, Spock is able to come to terms with the fact that his place is still with the crew of the Enterprise, and that his emotions are necessary for him to function in that role. And V'ger's story is about trying to find its purpose after completing its task of gathering all of the knowledge it could find in the known universe. Having come to the end of its purpose, V'ger returns to Earth to find its creator in the hopes that it can find what its ultimate purpose is. What it finds is that despite having acquired all the knowledge in the universe, for V'ger to truly evolve, it has to embrace emotion. And this emotion comes in the form of Decker and Ilea, whose union within V'ger results in the birth of a new entity that is neither biological nor mechanical. As cliche as it may sound, it is ultimately love that is the final ingredient needed for true consciousness. After all is said and done, the characters come to the conclusion that perhaps change is necessary, both for personal growth as well as for humanity as a whole to evolve. And the film ends with the tagline, "The human adventure is just beginning," which speaks both to the film's place as the first Star Trek movie, as well as its statements on the search for meaning in the universe. It is a beautiful conclusion to a beautiful film. Overall, I would consider Star Trek the Motion Picture to be a very underrated science fiction film. I had been in a bit of a creative slump over the past couple of months, and despite having watched dozens of films in that time, this film was the one to get me out of that slump. As an adult, I've come to recognize just how compelling this movie is both visually and thematically. It may not be as tightly written or emotionally gripping as some of the Star Trek films that came after it, but Star Trek the Motion Picture is nevertheless a compelling science fiction film that harkens back to the fundamental questions that the genre raises. It is still a film that I have a lot of appreciation for because of its incredible effects, magical atmosphere, compelling character arcs, and thought-provoking themes. As such, I think it deserves to be remembered as one of the greats. So I'm giving Star Trek the Motion Picture 4 out of 5 stars. Truly an underrated gem that deserves more love both from Star Trek fans and science fiction fans alike. I hope you all have enjoyed this video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content, and let me know your own thoughts on Star Trek the Motion Picture as well as any other sci-fi films you'd be interested in me covering on this channel. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.